Good morning, and here we are for Tap Talk Live. This is number 55, and here we are this morning as the last show in the European Sustainable Development Week shows. We've done, I think, 8 or 9 interviews now, and this morning we're here with Maria from Friends of the Earth, and we're talking about introducing pollinators to urban areas. So if you're live with us this morning, then please do put your comments and questions in Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you're also watching the recording, you can do the same, but we'll show where you can get in contact with Maria if you want to know more as well, nearer the end. So Maria, can you talk a little bit, we'll start off with Friends of the Earth, or the Friends of the Earth in Malta, for instance, and the work that you do here.
Yeah, so Friends of the Earth Malta has been around as an NGO under a different name initially, but since the mid-80s. So they've been campaigning on various topics, both locally and internationally, because it's part of an international network of different NGOs across the globe. Locally, though, we're currently working on a number of different campaigns, primarily related to food, agriculture, and biodiversity, which is one of the topics we'll be discussing today. But we also work on a climate change and energy campaign as well. And in the past, we've also worked on resource use, so cutting down on excess resource use, plastic, and stuff like that. We also have a small office in Floriana. So in 2018, I believe, the office was set up, and there we have a community garden. So outside our office, there's sort of a patch of garden where we meet around once a month with members of the community, and we just garden. It's lots of fun.
Oh, brilliant. So are you producing food there for the community as they do it, and they shall share?
Yes, so it's a work in progress. The community garden was set up a few years ago, and slowly it's been growing into something larger. Over the summer months, it sort of dips down naturally. We have less water, and it's less fun to garden. But over the winter months and spring, we meet more regularly, and we actually pick up quite a number of things. Yeah.
So as you've gone through a lot of the things that Friends of the Earth do, I'll just put the link on screen. You can go to foemalta.org and find out more about how to contact Maria and the office in Floriana and the community garden. This morning we're focused on pollinators, which I guess has a link to the community garden as well, right?
Yeah, it definitely does. A lot of the plants that we put in, they attract pollinators, and they're just generally good for the environment as well.
So why do we need to protect pollinators? And actually, can you also say what pollinators are? Because I just think in terms of bees, but it's wider than that, isn't it?
Yes, naturally. It's bees, butterflies, and there's lots of little animals that you wouldn't even expect, sort of like beetles. There are also certain bats that are also pollinators. So it's really much wider than bees. Our primary focus was always on bees because they're more accessible. People naturally think of them as pollinators. And there's also a close link in Malta. Historically, we've always made honey. So there's a really strong sort of bee culture, if you could call it that. There's lots of beekeepers. And so it made sense for us to focus primarily on bees.
So why do we need to help pollinators, or what do pollinators do for our environment?
Yeah, so that's a big question. But primarily they pollinate. So a lot of what we eat, around 80% of the crops and also the wild plants, are actually pollinated by these pollinators, bees and the other examples I gave. And they are important to our food system. So without them, we would not have a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we have that we take for granted. We sort of walk into a supermarket and they're just there. But there's a whole process before that, leading up to the production of the food, where bees and other pollinators are really integral to the process. So it's important to cultivate them also in a wild sense. and ensure that they have spaces which are safe, even in urban areas. So what I'll be discussing later, it's important to give them spaces which are safe for them, basically.
Right, and is that what Friends of the Earth does as one of your themes in Malta, is to give areas to make sure that they are good or attractive for the pollinators to come to?
Yes, exactly. And we do this in quite a number of ways. So one of the ways, very simply, is raising awareness. So just educating people on what they can do in their own homes, on how they can actually attract pollinators and create safe spaces. But we've also collaborated with other places, such as Palazzo Falzone, which I'll be discussing later, where we actually set up a Pollinator Haven. So we collaborated with this museum around 2 years ago now, because in around January 2020, the actual Pollinator Haven was set up. And this place is based in Medina, which is a very urban area. Although it's surrounded by like lots of natural fields, the actual place is quite urban. And so there's not many gardens which are easily accessible. And so we also chose this because it's quite a public place, so it's easy for people to access and also sort of educate themselves on what they can do as well. And essentially this museum is originally 800 years old, so it dates back to the medieval period, and it's managed by another NGO, Fondazione Patrimonio Malti, and it was set up as a museum around 15 years ago. And the last owner, his name was Olaf Golscher. He passed away in 1962. But through some research, we uncovered that he actually had beehives at another one of his homes, which was quite interesting. So he had a sort of rural, well, we termed it a rural retreat, but it was sort of a country home in Imjar in Malta. And here he had a sort of farm, like a miniature farm. He had a donkey, he had some chickens, but he also had some beehives as well. So we created also this historic link between the last owner and setting up this Pollinator Haven as well.
So when you have like a Pollinator Haven like Palazzo Falzone, does it have beehives in it, or is it really kind of like a resting place for pollinators to come in and then go out to wherever they call home?
Yeah, so there are no actual beehives. The space is relatively small. So we chose a sort of disused area of the roof, which wasn't accessible by the public. It's not very safe for the public to go there, so it's totally disused. And we set up a small garden. So in essence, we just put the plants there. We used a system which is set up by a local company, Vivacity. They specialize in roof gardens, and specifically roof gardens in Mediterranean climates. So it's specifically designed to go on the roof. It's very sort of shallow pockets of soil, which mimic the local surroundings. You might be familiar with Garrick, so places which are naturally found, like the Parc del Maestral or on cliff edges. It sort of mimics that with these shallow pockets of soil. And we chose plants specifically which attract pollinators. And many of which we chose as well, specifically are Maltese. So plants like Widnit el Bahar. We also put in some wild daisies, some thyme, some rosemary. So things which would be happy here, but also attract pollinators as well.
So can people do things like that at home a little bit? I mean, I have one of your bee hotels on a wall near a bougainvillea, which is lovely in flower at the moment. I think it's a bougainvillea. So we put it there. And I think I know what it's used for, but I'm not sure. Can you sort of go into that a little bit?
Yeah.
What people could do at home?
Yeah, so one of the things that Friends of the Earth does, if you become a member, you also get a bee hotel as well. And these are designed for solitary bees. So usually we think of bees as being in a hive, working together, but there's also some bees which are totally solitary. And these hotels are often made of like bamboo reeds, probably the one you have at home, and also like little wooden things with lots of little holes. And there well, we call it a hotel, but they do sort of go and it's sort of like a nest for them. And they live there for some time. But there are also other ideal habitats which you can make from home. So even if you have a small balcony, like lots of people don't have access to outdoor space, or even something as simple as a windowsill, you can put some herbs there, such as thyme or rosemary. And these will, when in flower, they will actually attract pollinators. This gives them a space to forage. And it's something small which you can do. And also, if you have access to a garden, you can also let the wild flowers just sort of pop up. So lots of people think of them as weeds. They cut them down. In Maltese, there's the phrase hashish hazin, which means bad grass. But in reality, a lot of these, what we term as weeds, are actually quite good for the environment. And it's good to just let them be. And even if it looks a bit messy, some people think it looks messy, it's actually very useful.
It sounds kind of natural if you just let them grow. But even if you've got an apartment or a windowsill or balcony, you can just grow a few herbs and you are helping pollinators automatically.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know herbs was one of the things. But that sounds like a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk more about Palazzo Falzone and how long it took to do, for instance? Because I think you're in your second or third year.
It would be the second year. So it was officially all planted in January 2020, but the collaboration kicked off in around mid-2019, if I'm not mistaken. Initially there was some research done to see the feasibility of it. As I said, it's a very old building, so to make sure that it would be safe and that it would be all right as well. Also to explore the links between the museum and pollinators as well. And then the garden was set up in early January, and then COVID hit, so it became inaccessible for quite a number of months. But actually, in a strange way, it was a blessing in disguise. So gardens, as people are familiar with, when you put a plant in, it's very small. But in a way, since it was close to the public, it gave it time to develop and become sort of a fully fledged garden. And in truth, it's an ongoing process. So there's a maintenance team who were already working there, and they've taken on the garden as part of their maintenance. And they continue to tend to it. They also cut it and sort of groom it, for lack of a better word. And they maintain it, watering as well. And also another thing we worked on before actually setting up the garden was making sure that there was a connection between the well and the roof as well. So being that it's a very old building, there's still the natural wells which are preserved over there. And we made sure that it was accessible. So to cut down on water waste, a lot of the garden, when there's actually water in the well, is watered through the well water.
So is this the kind of project you would like to see done in other areas as well? Are you looking for more roofs?
Yes. So it is always an idea. When there is the opportunity to do so, definitely, it's something that Friends of the Earth Malta sort of wants to work on. And it's something that's not extremely difficult to do. Once it's set up, there is a little bit of maintenance in terms of watering. But as I mentioned, it's designed to live in our habitat. So it's designed to, go for periods of time without water as well. And so it's not something very extreme to do.
So it's the kind of thing that some businesses, for instance, could think of doing as part of their ESG
Yes, definitely. Yes,
activities. They could do
exactly.
that and maybe create an area where people can relax as well as pollinators can relax.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
It sounds as though it's got maintenance, but not huge maintenance, as it
No,
were,
no,
and
no.
that it's especially if it's designed like a garage, as it were, then
Yes,
that
exactly.
mentally makes sense to me. Although I've
Yes,
seen the
yes,
pictures
yes.
also of Falzone.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, all right, that's super. So, did you see a huge difference between, or can you track the activity of pollinators in the garden? Have you seen a huge difference between year 1 and year 2, as it were?
Yes. So, well, the biggest difference I would say between before and after, rather than year 1 and year 2, before, I mean, perhaps to an extent also there was a less observation, but before, primarily the pollinators would be seen in the courtyard area where there's a bougainvillea, there's also some jasmine, and there's a few other plants as well in that area, which would attract pollinators. But as I mentioned, this roof area was totally unused and it was empty, so there would be less activity. Once the garden was installed, almost immediately we started to see like a flurry of activity. There was
Okay.
also sort of little creatures that set up residence there, like we would observe little lizards, and we would have regular visitors. You could observe the same similar bees. I wouldn't say literally the same bees, but similar bees coming back as well. And we would also see sort of birds perch themselves as well in the garden. So it just became more of an active space as well.
So it's its own ecosystem all in one go
Exactly. And
after a period of time.
it's really impressive because it's not a huge space. So the roof space is not very large just because of the footprint of the actual building. And so this area is quite small, but it still manages to attract quite a number of pollinators and other little creatures who have found sort of an area of safety in a way.
And I think you did say that it's not accessible to the public, is it?
So it is not physically accessible. They can't walk around the garden, but they can actually go and see it. So it's on the rooftop of Palazzo Falzone.
Okay,
So
so
after
you can
your
look over.
visit, exactly, after your visit to the museum, it's really a lovely museum. So I would suggest anyone watching.
No,
sort
it
of
is.
head
It's
there.
lovely. I've been to it, but I haven't seen
yes.
but a few years ago, so I didn't see
Okay,
the
so
garden actually.
maybe it wasn't in yet.
But it's well worth a visit for sure.
Yes, yes, yes. It's a historic house museum, so it's really filled with lots of antiques, fine arts, all collected, as I said, by the last owner, by Olaf Kolscher. And yes, so it is accessible in the sense you can go and see it, and you can go observe it as well. But it's not a garden which you can walk around in.
Yeah, which is probably important, isn't it? So
Yeah.
so the ecosystem that you've got in there isn't disturbed by us trampling along
Exactly.
it with our feet and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
yes,
But it's nice that we can
exactly.
see it.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. I'll have to go and have a look then next time
Yeah.
I'm in Malta or at some point. So lastly then, you have a petition at the moment,
Yeah.
which is an important one. Did you want to have a quick chat about that? Tell us all about the petition.
Yeah, so this is an EU-wide petition, so it's part of a climate of change campaign. You can see the link is being shown on the screen. And basically, the primary focus is on migration or climate-induced migration, really, which at the moment is not recognized. When someone is seeking asylum, they can't say, for example, my farm was destroyed, or we didn't get enough rain, and so we couldn't sustain our farm. It's not legally recognized as for someone who is seeking asylum, but very often it can be very destructive. It will destroy people's entire livelihood due to climate change, in essence, which we're already starting to see the effects of. And these effects are felt in developing countries and countries which are poorer, where the government can't necessarily help or offer any help, and it drives people out of their homes, which causes obviously lots of issues. And this petition is trying to raise awareness. It will be presented to European leaders at the COP27, which is a big sort of conference which is coming up in November, and this year it will be held in Egypt, and we're collecting signatures locally, but as I said, it's also being spread across the EU.
So the petition is one that one would sign to say, look, politicians, please look at this subject because it's a problem.
Exactly.
It's getting their attention as well as getting our attention, because you're saying, do you think this is a problem? Does it sound like a problem? It certainly does to me.
Precisely, yes.
Actually, so coincidentally, I watched a quick documentary a couple of days ago about people moving from the Himalayas down into the cities, because when it's not that I think the amount of rainfall has increased, the period has got shorter, and when it rains, it's all down in one go, and everything is, so their crops get lost. So they're farmers, they live in this beautiful, idyllic sort of place, and they can't live there because they can't farm. And they were comparing one area like that to another area where it had similar problems, which was just further north in India. But there they had done things to attract the farmers back again, such as changing the way they do the agriculture and et cetera, et cetera. So instead of everyone flooding to the cities and working in factories, they were still trying to farm, and they were trying to adapt to climate change. So adaptation rather than migration. And I had no idea it was happening, really. So it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And one of the key examples which is happening right now is in Pakistan, where we're seeing lots of floods which are just devastating the entire country, and the government doesn't want to seem to act. They don't want to recognize that it's a problem, and this leaves people devastated, and they can't do anything about it. So yes, this petition is primarily trying to raise awareness around the issue, trying to make people conscious, but also trying to present it towards leaders who can perhaps affect some change as well.
Okay, brilliant. So what we'll try and do is we'll try and post those links in the recordings as well. So I can see there's a few people on live. If you do have any comments and questions, or just want to post the link there, if you want to do that, then that's great. And you can get in contact with Maria at foemalta.org. You can find the contact details there. I think you've got the whole team there.
Yes.
On one page,
we've got to meet the team page.
Meet the team page. So Maria's details are on there. And thank you for coming along. Any last thoughts for us before we go to some music and say
I wanted to thank you for this opportunity and for this initiative, because I think it's really great to celebrate the people who are actually working on bettering the environment and celebrating all of these initiatives. So I think it's really great.
Thank you. Actually, yes, I think we get wrapped up in all the bad news. But there's lots of positive things happening here in Malta, right here and right now. And your organisation is one of those leading these changes. So thank you for bringing us awareness to these things, because we really wouldn't know otherwise. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll pop some music on and a slide to finish with. And then, yes, we'll be back live 10 o'clock tomorrow with, I think tomorrow the subject is what type of water is good for coffee. I think we're doing tomorrow, if I remember rightly. And we'll be discussing that. Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.